welcome to episode number 3 of Empire State Hoops. This is your host, Adam Rothschild, alongside Matthew Vargo, and we had a first taste of our New York Knicks on Monday night when they played the Boston Celtics in their opening preseason matchup, which the Knicks took a victory over Boston. So, Matt, positives, negatives, what do you think we got the best out of this game, and what are some things that the team should look at for the rest of the preseason moving forward?
Well, some things that are positive about it is that some of the core contributors you would expect to ball out because the Celtics were playing a team full of second stringers. While Tibbs was playing everybody, the starters did their job. Randall, he only played 13 minutes, but he was 3 for 4, had 11 points, 1 of 2 from 3, made all of his free throws, plus 10 in terms of plus minus. Mitchell Robinson, probably talk about him a little bit later, played the most out of all the starters, 23 minutes, 5 of 6 shooting, 10 points. Did miss all 3 of his free throws, though, after his trainer said that that's kind of a big thing he was working on. Maybe just kind of a tough break, but you'd like to see that get a little bit better. Jalen Brunson, only 6 minutes, but he shot the ball 5 times in those 6 minutes, made 4 of them for 10 points and plus 7. So overall, that's a positive thing to take away from it.
Yeah, we talk about Boston, like we mentioned. They didn't play any of their starters. They rested Tatum, Brown, Holiday, and Porzingis. None of them played because they played the previous night in Boston against the 76ers.
And they won that game, I believe.
I believe, yes, they did. It was a pretty close game against Philly. And I think, like you mentioned before, the Knicks, they only played their starters basically the first quarter. They played Brunson, Randall, and Barrett only in that first quarter. Like you said, Brunson played 6 minutes. I believe Barrett only played like 10 minutes. He had like 8 to 10 points. And those were some good things to look at. Another positive, though, that we have to look at, Emmanuel Quickley. He dropped 21 points. He was our leading scorer. So that's some good production, obviously, for IQ coming into another big season for him, obviously. He's got to bounce back. He had an injury in the postseason last year against the Miami Heat where he missed the last few games of that series after he went out in Game 3. So he's looking to bounce back, obviously, this season. So this must have been a huge step for him, even in the preseason.
Yeah, he did play. I think he played the second most minutes overall. I believe Jericho Sims played the most minutes out of any player 2 nights ago. I've always tried, but yes, it was 2 nights ago. 8 of 14, by far took the most shots of any Knick. 2 of 5 from 3, had 21 points, was a 0 in plus minus, although I don't really care that much about plus minus because it's preseason. You just want to get your core rotation guys, get their feet wet, so that way not coming out all sloppy for the opening night against these same Boston Celtics at MSG, right?
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
Trying to make sure it's not at TD Garden, but it is at MSG. The right Garden, I should say, not TD Garden, the right Garden, MSG. Overall, positive sign to see Emmanuel Quickley, who was second in Sixth Man of the Year voting last year, that he's kind of picking up right where he left off, playing his day.
Yeah, you just mentioned the 6-man thing. Like, he finished, obviously, behind Malcolm Brogdon last season, and obviously he's trying to push it up there maybe a little bit because he knows he has potential to be in this rotation. Obviously, he has been these past several seasons, and we know that he's capable of doing everything on the floor.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if he wants to prove... Well, obviously, he probably would want to prove himself in terms of being a starter in this lineup, but I just don't see where he would fit in the starting lineup. For me, he's perfect as a guy, kind of like a Jamal Crawford, where he just kind of comes off the bench, gives you instant offense while the starters are out, which is kind of what you need. Every championship team needs a guy like that. I believe the Warriors had that with Jordan Poole a few years ago. The Nuggets, I don't think the Nuggets really had somebody that fit that type specifically, but they had a deep bench. So this idea that, the bench doesn't matter. No, it does. You need a reliable bench because your starters can't play every minute. As much as you may want to do it, you need to have some depth.
Yeah, and you mentioned Denver before, and I was going to say Caldwell Pope out, obviously.
I believe he started, though, for the Nuggets, or I believe it was Murray, KCP, Jokic, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon. Now, if I'm wrong about that, like, you could tell me, and people in the comments tell me, but I think that was the starting 5 they rolled with.
Yeah, and obviously Denver, of course, the NBA champions last season, and that's what they did. And the Knicks, who knows when that's going to happen again? It could be forever, it seems like, at this point.
Last time the New York Knicks won a championship, to quote Stephen A., I was 5 years old. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm 51. We have suffered! And he said that back in 2019. It's even longer since then.
Yeah, and that was, 1973, I believe?
1973.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a long, long time ago, and we're still thinking about it to this day. Anyways, you were mentioning Mitchell Robinson before. He had 10 points and 7 boards in this opening preseason game, and he outdueled former Knick Luke Cornett. I know that's a little bit of a shock to say, but yes, he did outduel Luke Cornett, who did the 10-foot block from the 3-point line once again.
Looked like he was trying to jump off a diving board or something.
Yeah, we just had to get a laugh in there. But yes, Mitchell Robinson. Did he prove what his trainer said on that Instagram story like we mentioned? But obviously it's preseason still.
Yes and no. The stats look good to the eye test. Like I said, he had 10 points, made all but one shot, and had a +11 ±. But again, there was no Porzingis. It would have been, had he done that against Porzingis in the limited minutes, then I would have been sold. I know Porzingis isn't a great defender, but it would have been a lot more convincing. But again, the free throws. I am a stickler for free throws because it's free throws. They're free points. You stand there by yourself and just with a flick of the wrist, just get the points. Missed all 3 of those 2 nights ago. So if you're going to try to have the free throw bugaboo, it's best to get it out in the preseason. Keep working on it in the gym so that when you get into the regular season, you can't just employ like hack-a-Mitch tactics to slow down the offense.
Yeah, and obviously in training camp, I'm sure that's something he's been working on, and they'll still have practices, obviously, for him to figure that out because we know how Mitchell Robinson is. He's a dominant center in this league. He outdueled Jared Allen and Evan Mobley in the playoffs last year. Bam Adebayo he could not get with, but
Bam's good. I know Bam, people criticize his offense, but Bam's a good center.
Yeah, because he can shoot outside, and that's something Robinson's not. He's not used to guarding big guys that are outside, which he's had to do in the past, but he knows that's a tough task because who are your other rebounders down in the rim? It could be Julius Randle. Obviously, you have Josh Hart, who's that rebounding guard. But Mitchell Robinson is going to make improvements. This is just a start, and obviously we will see better things. Like he averaged a double-double last season, obviously. He was injured in a portion of the season in February, but he's obviously looking to bounce back this year like we've mentioned here.
Came back, yeah. He was hurt. He came back for the playoffs. He and Hartenstein completely just overwhelmed Cleveland's big twin tower duo of Mobley and Allen. And I thought people thought the Cavs were going to, and everyone thought that was the strength of the Cavaliers, but the Cavaliers' bigs, neither one can shoot very well from outside, so Mitch was able to just kind of plop them in the paint, and you don't have to worry about them. If they're going to shoot like an 8-foot jumper, let them. They can't shoot. Let them do it.
Yeah, that's the one thing that Robinson can be good at is forcing guys outside of the paint, like centers like Bam Adebayo or Kristaps Porzingis, taking shots outside and forcing a miss, because that's something he can do with the wingspan that he has. And now to get to our next discussion. Good old Evan Fournier. It's a great time to talk about him. So, he still thinks that he wants to be in this rotation, this is now his 3rd season, I believe, with the Knicks, after he came over from the Boston Celtics back in 2021, I believe.
It's really been 3. Man, time flies by.
It's been time. Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
So he said this quote. He said, "To be honest, I might be dreaming, but to me, I can help the team. I'm a good player. I can bleeping play. I can bring stuff to that this team doesn't have to. I have hope to play." What's your take?
I don't have my wallet with me, but just pretend this is my wallet. Here, buddy, here's some money. Buy yourself a bus ticket. Just go home. Evan Fournier, in 21 minutes last night, shot 4 of 10. Not great, but not anything putrid by any stretch. 3 of 7 from 3. And again, this is all against backups. He still had a -5 when he was out there, so and for those of you, I'll just explain it, because plus-minus, if you have a negative plus-minus, that means that the team is getting outscored when you're out there, so you're not helping the team. And I think I have the stats, basically stitched into my brain. It was 6 points off, 10 minutes a game, and not barely above 30% shooting. So this was, had he balled out or something, this could have been a great chance for Tibbs to maybe restore some confidence. But he just kind of played blech against a bunch of backups, so it's not great.
Yeah, this was probably his one shot to do it, and he blew it up. He blew it up. Like you said, 4 for 10. He kind of blew it up, but he might get some other opportunities. Obviously, they're going to have their next preseason game on Saturday against the Minnesota Timberwolves, which is still going to be a tough matchup because the two big guys with Towns and Gobert, but obviously they're going to be limited in minutes. Anthony Edwards is probably going to be limited in minutes.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not going to be a tough game for them, but the Knicks have all the advantages for that game on their home floor. But like we've been mentioning here about Evan Fournier, the problem with having him on the roster, he has no trade value. He has no trade value. Mm-hmm. If you traded him last offseason and if you traded for Donovan Mitchell, you could have used him in a trade when he had it then, because he was still in the rotation then for the Knicks back when in the Kemba Walker days. After Walker got benched, it was Alec Burks and Fournier at the 1 and the 2. So you could have had Fournier traded along with a player, I don't want to say RJ Barrett, but his name was thrown around in Donovan Mitchell trade talks last offseason.
Yeah. But, I mean, hey, in a roundabout way, Donovan Mitchell may not even sign an extension with the Cavaliers. So who knows? You may just sign him for nothing, and peace will be restored to our world. But Fournier, I believe, those are stats I don't remember off the top of my head. But even in that one season with the Knicks where he was in the rotation, he still wasn't, he was fine. Because the problem with Fournier is that he's the kind of player that his only value is his shooting, and if his shot isn't falling, he's got no other card to play for an NBA team. Because is he a good defender? No, not at all. He's like a traffic cone out there on defense, which is harsh, but it's just the facts. I'll keep it real. He's not a great facilitator, not a great rebounder. It's all about his shooting, and as I mentioned, 30% from the field. His shot isn't falling. So he's not doing anything else to help the team.
Yeah, it's like we've talked about, I don't think we've talked about this before, but like the Knicks have had good shooters in the past, but they just suck at defending.
Steve Novak.
I don't want to throw J.R. Smith's name in there, but I know there's times where he can be a good defender. Raymond Felton.
Raymond Felton.
Good old Raymond Felton. But yeah, there's definitely players that we've had in the past compared to Fournier, because Fournier's been with a lot of teams. He had that long tenure in Orlando. He was drafted by the Denver Nuggets.
Mm-hmm. He was.
Yeah, he was in Denver early on.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so he has a lot to bring to the table when it comes to shooting, but nothing else is on his resume. It's just that. Like, there's really no other way to say it.
Also, Evan Fournier, I remember back in around 2018, there was actually a lot of hype surrounding him because he was averaging around 18 a game. Then he just kind of plateaued, and it just kind of, he is who he is. From that point onward, he hasn't taken the jump everyone expected to. And correct me if I'm wrong, now he's like 30, so he's just kind of more a declining asset. And everyone knows that the Knicks are just going to try to trade him, so it's kind of like with John Wall. It's like, well, why would we give you anything when you know you're just going to get rid of him anyway? If anything, I'm kind of surprised he's still there, that just because guys like him in the locker room can create tension, which most contending teams don't have any of that. The only example I can think of was the Lakers last season, and even then, they only became a contender after they let Russ go. So if anything, just buy him out, let him go off into the sunset, play on a minimal deal for any team that's more than willing to give him a shot, and just move on.
Yeah, I'm sure there is teams that have thought about giving him a shot. There's not many examples I can think of now because we're coming into the season now. So I would expect the trade deadline will probably be the next time this topic comes up during the year. So we'll obviously keep an eye on that and see if we hear anything else about Evan Fournier. But on the other side of things, Tom Thibodeau has to figure out what players he wants to keep on this roster. Obviously, his starting five is in. Emmanuel Quickley is on this roster. Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, and obviously other options. Jericho Sims will be on this roster. Deuce McBride will be on this roster. But there are some players that are on the bottom of this roster that he's going to have to look at. So there's a couple players, for example. Jacob Toppin is a great example. Daquan Jeffries, Ryan Archie-Diacono. There's also Dwayne Washington Jr. and Isaiah Roby. So a bunch of these guys have a chance to get onto the roster, but only like at least probably maybe 2 or 3 of them will, because it's the 15-man roster, obviously, and the others are going to get put into the G League.
Well, I would imagine that because there was some of the players you mentioned, such as Roby, Arcidiacono, they didn't play in that game against the Celtics, so maybe Tibbs is just seeing something in practice where it's just like they just don't have the juice to be the 10 through 15 guys on the bench. And in the case of Arcidiacono, like, he's been in this league for a long, long time. After the 2016 Nova National Championship team was when he came into the league, and he still hasn't really made any meaningful impact. So he just kind of is who he is. I don't expect him to really be sticking around and in the NBA on the NBA roster. Now, I could be wrong about that, obviously, but guys like Toppin, Knight, Jeffries, I mean, they all got some spin last night. I would expect that to continue going into the Timberwolves game, because unlike for established players, these guys, this is their big break. Like, if one of them just balls out, like, who knows? Maybe they'll sign, be on the team, and just, I don't know, live out their dream.
Yeah, I think the one player that did stand out, though, was Jacob Toppin. Obviously, he's the younger brother of Obi Toppin, who the Knicks traded in the offseason, like we mentioned in episode number 1.
Yeah, he's on I always forget he's on the Pacers
now.
Yeah.
So Jacob Toppin showed this. He's not as athletic as Obi is, because Obi was, like a forward who can take the ball up the court with speed and just dunk it. This guy, Jacob Toppin, he's more of a high flyer. He's kind of like, I'm trying to think what player is kind of like him. There's a bunch of players in this league. Like, he's maybe like a non-athletic version of John Morant that can dunk the ball, maybe. Because that's the one thing. Because Jacob Toppin has hops, like we saw the other night. he made some dunks, he made some plays, but there's obviously going to be a lot to look at because he knows he has other players trying to get roster spots, like all these names we mentioned. Dwayne Washington, we mentioned Daquan Jeffries.
Did not play. Jeffries did play. Played around 12 minutes. Got 3 points on 1 of 4. He only made shot was a 3 and +1. Also, no turnovers. That's another key one. And also, in the preseason for Tibbs, you got to be able to play some defense. If you're on a Tibbs team and you can't play defense like we're seeing with Evan Fournier, you just can't crack his rotation.
Yeah, and I think also another player, like I mentioned this before, Deuce McBride. I think this is going to be a huge test for him because he knows he's going to be coming off the bench in a spot possibly. It's just he knows that when he was drafted in the draft class with Quentin Grimes, he knew that Grimes was confident coming out of Houston. He knew that he was going to get a spot. And that's why Grimes has the 2 spot now in the starting lineup. But obviously, there is room for Deuce McBride on this roster off the bench with all those guys like Hart and DiVincenzo and Quickly. There is definitely room for that with him and Jericho Sims as well.
Well, McBride, if he would definitely like another shot to show what he could do in the preseason, because against the Celtics in 19 minutes, it was kind of rough for him. 3 of 10, 6 points, 0 of 4 from 3. So you'd like to see a little bit more out of him in basically your first game action of the year.
Yeah, that's the one thing I love about Deuce McBride. He knows what to do in a certain situation and just handles it right away, just like every player on this team does. Like, we see how Jalen Brunson handles things, like with the New York media. And these players are very good at handling, especially with their young age. They know what to expect and what questions are being asked to them. And that's something very important, I think.
Yeah, there are certain types of media in professional sports that you don't want to vilify. You don't want to vilify the LA media, the New York media, Miami, Philadelphia, Boston, because you'll just get flamed and fans will turn on you. So being able to show that kind of maturity, and for example, with Brunson, it's because Brunson was a guy who had to spend 3 years in college, was a second-round pick. He had to basically work his way up to what he is now. And also, given that his father once played in the NBA, which is a tremendous help, so he knows that, hey, you got to handle yourself as a professional. And it's difficult because, these guys are almost our age, a little bit older than us. But it's very, very encouraging to see that.
Yeah, and he literally just did that. He followed Rick's footsteps, and obviously now he's an assistant coach with the Knicks now for Jalen. And It's just great that he can look up to him now, and that's obviously something that's great to have with this Knicks team. And Another thing that Tom Thibodeau mentioned, he said this during one of the media's at training camp, one of the media days, I believe. He mentioned that so far his thoughts is that Jericho Sims has been the best player he's seen in training camp.
That's kind of interesting because who knows, maybe he's been balling out during training camp, but in the first action with the Celtics, I mean, he was 26 minutes, only took one shot, had 7 total rebounds, 3 assists, 1 block. I know he's never going to put up really any gaudy offensive stats, but you did see something on defense, able to get rebounds and blocks. Also had no turnovers, which is nice. But overall, you'd like to just get a little bit more oomph on the offensive end. And it's early. It's definitely early, but you want to make a better first impression on the offensive end. Defensively, he's fine. That's just kind of how I see it as of right now.
Yeah, and I believe he realized this last year. He's playing behind 2 centers. And it was funny, when Mitchell Robinson got hurt, Sims got chances because Hartenstein was the starting center.
Yeah.
And we talk about this. There was the game in January they had last year against Boston, and Sims was coming off the bench, or I think he started that game. I forget what they did.
I can't remember it off the top of my head.
It was months ago. But I just remember Sims got so many opportunities, so many rebounds, so many hustle plays, out-rebounding Robert Williams and Al Horford. And that's something you don't expect out of Jericho Sims, but it was definitely great to watch. But he knows he has a lot more to bring to the table this year. But now he knows he's going to be definitely playing behind Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein, with both of them obviously being healthy.
And speaking of Hartenstein, he actually played pretty well. 20 minutes, 3 of 5 shooting, had 9 points, hit 3 of 4 from the free throw line, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, and a block. So honestly, a pretty solid outing, all things considered, to start off preseason.
Yeah, and I think this was a huge test for the Knicks in this opening preseason matchup. And before we go, Matt, we're going to preview the next game we have on Saturday for the Knicks. They're going to be home against the Minnesota Timberwolves for their second preseason matchup. And this obviously is going to be a big game because Minnesota has a lot of depth, obviously, with Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, and Rudy Gobert, obviously. But they also have a bench that can win you games. They have a bench that can win you games. They have a lot of young guys on this roster. And their head coach, obviously, is known for having big chances for this team.
Chris Finch, Minnesota's coach?
Yes, Chris Finch, yeah.
I remember. He came around kind of out of nowhere. I remember they fired the old head coach, brought him in from Toronto mid-season. Very weird. But so far, he's done a respectable job in Minnesota. Now, the Timberwolves, and I know it's preseason, but you definitely... The game's also in New York, I believe. Or is it in Minnesota?
It's in New York, yeah. It's in New York.
Okay. I mean, the Timberwolves, they're going to play their starters. I think Minnesota can be pretty... I think they can be more than decent in the West. I know last year they were plagued by injuries. Cat missed, I think, around 50 games. It was a lot. So you never really got to see the Gobert and Towns front court really manifest itself. Now, when they got to the playoffs against Denver, it was Jokic ate them both alive, which not a great sign, but it's another year for them. The Knicks obviously got another year with their guys, so I think it can be a very interesting watch.
Yeah, and I think the standout player for the Knicks to watch is probably gonna be Emmanuel Quickley again. So it's gonna be another big test for him to see if he can handle this pressure again. Obviously, a lot of the young guys, to see if other players get minutes. We'll see if Jacob Toppin maybe gets more minutes. Maybe see if Jeffries gets more minutes. Washington, and all these young guys the Knicks have. The rest of the guys on this roster, like Josh Hart and DiVincenzo, you can trust them because you know they're going to play hard. And
yeah.
And obviously the Knicks did not play Josh Hart in this preseason game. We didn't mention that before from Monday. Hart was sidelined, and
he was.
I believe RG Diakono was also sidelined.
Okay, then that makes a little bit more sense why neither suited up.
Yeah, but we should expect, hopefully Josh Hart does suit up for this game on Saturday against Minnesota. But for now, that'll be it here on episode number 3 of Empire State Hoops. It's been Adam Rothschild and Matthew Vargo, and we will see you in episode number 4 next week.